Thank you. I'm so full listening to you talk. Thank you so much. Um, it is really my honor to be here, Congressman Espaillat, and to all of the other guests who are here. My family is so deeply grateful and appreciative of this effort to award my dad with this Congressional Gold Medal. Because this event is celebrating and is rooted in Harlem, I wanted to share some stories from his time in Harlem. It's not what is usually talked about, but he grew up in the Harlem River houses with his parents and two brothers. His earliest years were shaped by his desire to do everything his older brother Skeets, who was just 13 months older, was doing. And so along with Roger, who came later, the brothers spent a lot of time playing handball in the courtyard, reading at the McCombs Bridge Library, which is right there in the Harlem River houses. And they learned to swim and played tons of time playing basketball at the 135th Street YMCA, which he called the Boys' Y. His mother stayed at home and she taught the boys how to iron, which he said was unusual in those years. She kept a regular schedule and menu of meals, lots of beans. And interestingly, she joined a milk cooperative run by Ella Baker that my dad helped with. And of course, it was Ella Baker who later became his movement mother and his mentor when he went south. And so his mother also often took the boys to visit with their maternal grandmother who lived in Jamaica, Queens. When my dad was young, he really enjoyed going around with his father, who they called Pop, as Pop went around the community talking to people, which he did a lot. His dad, who worked at a janitor at the 125th Street Armory, went to all of their baseball games and was a staunch supporter of the team, which was the only Black Little League team in New York City at that time. And he especially enjoyed going with his dad to visit with his aunts, who were Cotton Club dancers. And they kept up a steady running conversation about the state of Black life in America. So his early life was really shaped by the cultural richness of Black life in Harlem of the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. His sense of possibility was imprinted by the stories of his dancer aunts, one of whom was also the most popular Black cinema actress of the time. And then his Uncle Bill, who was an architect, had the winning submission to the 1939 Virginia State Fair, but that submission was rescinded when it was discovered that he was Black. And then his grandfather, William Moses, was a prominent minister and author and was known as the Baptist Garvey. So you then talked about, his transition, but the cultural foundation of his childhood and his academic opportunities that led him to Stuyvesant and then to Hamilton and to Harvard. But he was conflicted, he said. And so when the sit-in started, he went to Virginia to visit with his Uncle Bill and to get a closer look at what was going on with the sit-ins. And that experience ultimately compelled him to join his life to this centuries-old struggle for freedom that has been waged by generations of Black people in America. And he once said that the time that he spent living in Mississippi and working with SNCC and the Mississippi sharecroppers on voter registration was like living an entire lifetime in 4 years. He became really steeped in the organizing tradition of Ella Baker, and he came to understand this country and its history and how it works in really deep and profound ways. And this movement experience later shaped how he grew the Algebra Project and inspired the creation of the Young People's Project and of the We the People Math Literacy for All Alliance. To me, he spoke so courageously, but also compassionately about this country's history. Near the end of his life, he said this, that the historical inequities and disparities in our public schools, as across all of our public systems, operate along a constitutional fault line, an embedded caste system that we need to find our way across. And he wrote in his book, Radical Equations, I mean, he left so much for us to think about and to work on. But I just want to share this quote from his book. He said, "Today I want to argue that the most urgent social issue affecting poor people and people of color is economic access. In today's world, economic access and full citizenship depend crucially on math and science literacy. I believe that the absence of math literacy in urban and rural communities throughout this country is an issue as urgent as the lack of registered Black voters in Mississippi was in 1961. I believe we can get the same kind of consensus we had in the 1960s for the effort of repairing this. And I believe that solving the problem requires exactly the kind of community organizing that changed the South in the 1960s. This has been my work and that of the Algebra Project for the last 30 years. I know how strange it can sound to say that math literacy and algebra in particular is the key to the future of disenfranchised communities, but that's what I think and believe with all of my heart." So he left us with this amazing legacy, and I'm just so honored and privileged to be able to continue working on it through my work with the Young People's Project. Something that the pastor said during her invocation reminded me of him when she talked about digging deeper and looking closer and thinking bigger, because he did that. He did that his whole life and taught us, in the words of Ella Baker, to think deeply about who we are and where we have come from and where we are going. So again, I just want to thank you, Congressman, for your work on this, and we're so honored, and we hope it goes through.
Yes,